Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's program. This is Jim Summers. I'm Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer with Antenna Software. I'm joined here with Joseph June, my partner in crime, who is Senior Director of Product Management for Antenna. And today we're going to be going through part 2 of our Demystifying the Mobile Container webinar series. And this one's focused, as the title says here, on Bring Your Own Device, BYOD Security and Management. And what we're going to talk about today in the program is really defining what a mobile app container is. It's a term that is used quite often in today's sort of mobile conversation. So we're going to talk about what in fact a container is, what are the different types of containers, what do these containers actually do, and why do we need them? You know, why did they come about? What were the pains and the opportunities that caused us to develop these containers, and also provide some examples of containers in the wild and being used today. And if you have any questions along the way or want to tweet us, by all means, if you look at the bottom here, you can tweet us at Antenna Software or hashtag container webinar and share your thoughts with us. So that's the agenda, so let's jump right into it. But before we get into the heart of the conversation in the program, for those of you who are not familiar with Antenna, I just want to take a few moments just to explain who we are and what we do. Antenna Software has been in business for roughly 14 years, and we've always been focused on mobile applications and helping enterprises mobilize their businesses, whether for employees or for customers. The core of our offering is a platform called AMP Chroma. AMP stands for the Antenna Mobility Platform. And Chroma essentially helps businesses build, run, and manage all their mobile applications and content. These are run-the-business applications. These are not consumer-grade applications, but really ones, as I said earlier, for customers, employees, and partners. And the whole idea behind Chroma in doing these three things is helping business respond to the mobile challenge and enable the business to get to market quickly with mobile applications and content, and do so in a very flexible manner so that they can remain agile and flexible, and also manage risk, all the risks and challenges that come along with mobility as well in this constantly changing technology ecosystem that we operate in today. So you can see here on the following slide, these are some of the applications that we've built for many of our customers over the years. Whether it's a travel and transportation app for conductors, like the one for Amtrak in the upper left-hand corner, an e-ticketing application that you may have seen if you've been on an Amtrak anytime recently. Also for financial services, we built research library applications, we built field service applications, field sales in the lower right for companies like Eaton in the manufacturing space, field sales applications for a number of different industries. This one happens to be for Novo Nordisk in the life sciences space. And then also mobile shopping applications for retail organizations, consumer packaged goods. This application here is for Dick's Sporting Goods, which is a very large retail chain here in North America. So just to give you a sense of some of the clients and some of the applications that we've built. So I'm going to step back into today's program and leave the commercial here from Antenna. Hopefully that gives you good context for what we'll be talking about today and why we think we're credible discussing this topic. So again, getting back to container, it's a word that is used quite a lot and can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. If you joined us on part 1 of Demystifying the Container from early May, you may remember this slide. And these are all other terms that are used to describe much of the spirit of what a container is, whether it's referred to as a shell or a sandbox, a hub, which is a term that's used by BlackBerry for their BlackBerry hub, a partition, personas. And there's a lot of different words, but essentially, not only are there a lot of words, but there's as many vendors out there who claim to have containers as well. And many of those here you can see on the screen. And you can kind of break these down into 2 essential categories. Containers with an eye towards development, hybrid containers for developers, and also management containers with companies like the ones you see on the right side of the screen here. And in our last broadcast, we talked about containers from the hybrid perspective to enable developers. And really, as this slide shows here, is those hybrid containers are essentially helping developers build applications quickly and deploy them to users as easily as possible. Some common containers out there from the likes of PhoneGap and Sencha and some others there. But what we'll be really talking about today are more of security containers, management containers, that really help IT administrators who are looking for the security management and control over the devices, their users, and their applications. And essentially, it's where these two things converge. These two needs converge here. It's where speed and usability from a developer perspective converge with management and control from an IT perspective. And many are looking for one common container to do both of these things. But buyer beware. These are really two different solutions for two different needs. Where are they? Is there really a common container that can really accomplish both of these things? And we're going to delve into that today. So with that, in our last broadcast, we talked about the hybrid client, which, if you're not familiar with this term and you are not part of this webinar, you can go to our website, and I'll give you a link in a moment here to download that. But it's essentially a native container that allows developers to build applications that look, feel, and function like native applications, using things like HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, and so forth, to really pull those development tools forward and create content and put it into this native container for greater speed and agility and cross-platform portability and reusability and getting the things to make your application enterprise grade. And if you're interested in learning more about this, here is the link here that you see on the left-hand side, bit.ly/contain_this, and you can see this and many other webinars on demand. But let's do this. Let's talk about the container for mobile management. And by definition, according to Gartner here, mobile containerization is the ability to partition, manage, and secure data locally or virtually on a mobile device. And why is that important to us? Why do we care about that? Well, essentially, the trend of bring your own device has really lit up a need here for people to have these containers to really protect the information and manage that information properly for people that want to bring their own devices into the workplace. And that trend is certainly growing. Again, referencing Gartner here, according to Gartner, from a recent report in May, they say 70% of mobile professionals conduct their work on personal smart devices, or will by 2018. And close to 40% of companies plan to stop providing devices to workers by 2016, ultimately rising, they predict, to 50% by 2017. So as companies are developing their BYOD strategy, allowing employees to bring these devices in, there is this risk that is emerging between wanting to use these personal devices for personal activities and getting at personal information and applications, commingling with the same other applications that are being used for work, and commingling with data that needs to be protected and secured for the business. And essentially, companies in the MDM space, if you're not familiar with that acronym, mobile device management, really capitalized on this trend recently in recent years. This here is the Magic Quadrant from Gartner on the various players in the MDM space. And it's actually a crowded market with over 100 vendors around the world. Gartner distilled it down to roughly 18 or 20 of them on this particular vendor analysis here. And the market's growing very, very quickly. It's estimated to be close to an $800 million market today, and they predict growing to $1.6 billion by 2014. It's only 30% penetrated in North America, and about 65% of the revenue that these companies are getting is coming primarily from, or is coming from North America, with 17% in Western Europe and single digits for the rest of the world. Financial services is a big buyer today. About 25% of sales are from financial services companies, and over 70% of sales are to companies that are buying less than 500 seats today. So clearly, companies like you can see here, like SAP or Good or FiberLink, Mobile Iron, AirWatch, have really capitalized on this trend of BYOD and have been selling solutions and software to really help enterprises get control over those devices. But recently, you may have read a lot of the more recent backlash to MDM solutions. And you're starting to read more about employees who've started voicing concerns with these types of solutions, saying that they're very heavy-handed and very intrusive and invasive. And asking questions like, why do you need to have access to my entire device? This is my own device that I'm buying. I'm paying for the data plan. I'm paying for the device. Why do I need to give you access to the entire device? And why are you telling me I can't use certain apps on this device? And ultimately, who owns the data and the intellectual property that resides on the device, especially if I decide to leave the company? Who owns that? And who do I call for support if I have any issues for this? I know this is my own device, but if I have an issue in using some of the applications that you're asking me to use for work, who do I call? And that's a very gray line. And some of the customers that, antenna customers that I speak to are struggling with this. They're saying, I don't want to be in the device support business right now. It's very costly for me. And sometimes those support costs and some of these other headaches are outweighing the benefits of BYOD and causing some businesses to really reconsider the solutions for them. So enter the container. If MDM is being looked upon as potentially too heavy-handed and invasive, what can we do to kind of have our cake and eat it too? And what's happening here is containers are essentially doing something here where you can see the separation between work and play. And people are saying, how can I protect the data in the applications my employees use for work? That's typically something you'll hear from a business and IT organization. And they're saying separated and secure from the rest of the personal applications. How can we take, the calendaring, some of maybe my personal stock applications or shopping applications, and keep that separate from some of the other applications that I'm using in my personal life, between that and my work life as well. So that's really the opportunity where the container is really striking at the heart of that. And it is in a lot of ways being perceived as the best of both worlds, where the employee is feeling that, now I can use my own device without feeling like Big Brother is always watching me. And the IT department has a certain level of control over the company data and information being accessed from these personally owned devices. So with that, I'm going to talk for a second here how they work. And Joseph, I know I've been doing a lot of the talking here, and I'll go through this and see if you could maybe fill in some of the gaps for me, being the technology expert you are here on the call. Essentially, containers are mobile applications that are loaded onto devices, much like the typical OS-based installation process. So when a user opens the container on their device, they're instructed to go through an authentication process. And once they're authenticated, a virtual environment is launched whereby approved applications, those that are whitelisted, are accessible to the end user. From then forward, IT administrators can control the applications and content through a centralized management console. And all the apps and content used within the container are thereby secured, and the data is encrypted. And obviously the inverse is true, and the apps and content outside the container do not have access to the data store. So that is essentially, at a very high level, the way that containers work in creating that separation. Joseph, I'm not sure if you would add anything here and fill in some of the gaps here or finer points.
Right. I think that, I think at a very high level, this kind of describes the general approach that a lot of the management containers are taking. I think that there are different variations of different approaches depending on exactly, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that in upcoming slides, we basically differentiate some of those things and how they differ. In fact, I think that, unfortunately for a lot of customers, this has become rather a confusing topic, just because there are so many different variations and people are taking some different approach in solving, I guess, relatively a common problem that the companies have. But to kind of simplify it, I think that in general there are three different approaches when it comes to maintaining data security, integrity, and the management of the devices and the application. The first one, as Jim talked about, was just locking the device down. And you could take this approach kind of using an MDM approach. And basically what the company is saying to the employee is that, we own your device, everything on the device, and all the data on the device, right? So from a company perspective, the management model is very straightforward. However, I think what we're finding that is just like Jim pointed out, people are very attached to their devices. They see it as a very personal thing, right? So especially when you have applications that you use personally versus you have applications that use you exclusively for work. Of course, so as a result, I think that there's somewhat of a repulsion against companies willing to lock the entire device down. Now there are people who choose to simply have multiple devices. So you can have a company device and you can have a personal device. Of course, problem now is you have to carry around two devices, right? So I think that basically, what that causes kind of an evolution of that particular management model. And then there's a set of, this is relatively new, I would say, and there's this concept of workspace and there's a concept of personal space. And the way it works is that there are specific company-approved apps that you can install, on your device. Hence, you create a set of application, or even depending on how OS implements it, you may even have a specific view or specific profile that you just have access to your company-approved application. And really, the way this works is that the company basically has to approve an existing application for corporate use. And normally, how this would work is that they may be using some sort of wrapping technology where they're basically putting a container around an existing application that gives them specific management capability. And those capabilities usually are the way an application might connect to the backend, right? Where it connects and what level of security that it implements, versus how an application might store, or how or when an application might store data locally to the device, right? So what happens is that if you have an application and if you have a native wrapper on top of that application, you may be able to kind of intercept, or you may be able to see where an application is trying to connect to and decide whether it's okay or it's not okay. Right? So in the sense that, a corporate space in your device may consist of applications that are wrapped, around this native container model, which are, company approved, and where you would have to get those applications is probably through some sort of a company-specific app store or some other distribution method. And this has been pretty popular because what's happening is that I think the specific device vendors are kind of presenting that as a solution. I think BlackBerry Balance is an example. Samsung also had produced a similar solution for Android, which is called Samsung Knox. And AT&T has a product called Toggle, which is a little bit more device independent, but basically, provides sync capability. So that, that's kind of we'll call that kind of the space or wrapping-based containment technology. And the third and the final one is, I guess Gartner kind of described it as app-specific security. But what that does is that instead of taking an existing app and wrapping it using some other technology, it basically instructs you to rewrite the application to use their specific APIs, right? So, and if you look at their APIs, again, it usually has to do with some sort of a data storage or data communication layer. So that in order for you to be able to store data locally on the device, you have to use our API in your application to do so. In order for you to communicate to something in the backend, you would have to use our API to do so, right? So in that case, what they're able to do is, let's say that you try to access anything in the company network, well, that particular API within your application can redirect you to a login screen that a company may have implemented, right? So those are kind of app-specific security. Now, the advantage of this one is that, well, there's a lot of flexibility because you're basically going into the code level of the application and rewriting it. Of course, the negative part of it is that you have to rewrite your application to use their APIs, right? The total flexibility, but quite a bit, it could result in a lot of rework. Versus the separate spaces approach is, in general, wrapping technology is much faster to implement, and probably an IT administrator will be able to tell pretty quickly whether or not an application can be wrapped and managed that way. So, again, a separate space is less control and less flexibility, but faster time of implementation. I think that for a lot of the customers, I think their needs can be met by maybe one or more of these approaches. I think that you see a lot of different variation of this type of containment management model, but I think that in general they can be kind of categorized into one of these three categories.
Good. So if you go to the next slide here, when you look at the vendor landscape and many of the companies out there that talk about having a container, you can see there's a lot of different companies across a lot of different sort of parts of the ecosystem. And you can see here from the left side, mobile application development platforms. Then you got mobile device management, you got mobile application management, virtualization, and security. And these, by no means, as I said earlier, there's over 100 of vendors out there that claim to provide even MDM functionality alone. And there's a lot of vendors out here that provide some level of container, not just these here. But this just gives you a flavor of them. But when you're out there and looking to containerize and protect your information, you need to consider the perspective that each of the vendors is coming from and what their agenda is. And then try to see how that aligns to what your vision is and where you need to take this and what you're trying to ultimately accomplish. So obviously a security company is coming at containers from really securing and locking down as much as possible for companies that have very rigorous SLAs or regulations or compliance regimens they need to adhere to. MDM companies obviously come from it from the device perspective, but are expanding into the space of MAM as well. Virtualization comes from the desktop world and is expanding their capabilities into the mobile space. So when you look at this space, you can see here this is a spectrum of solutions out there, and you need to really carefully consider what their perspective is before making a decision on which ones to go forward with. So what I'd like to do is take a second here, and again, Joseph, maybe you and I can go through this jointly here and together, and talking about how Antenna looks at this market. As I mentioned earlier, our platform is called AMP Chroma, and core to that is the AMP client, which is a secure container that communicates with a client interface on the AMP platform server, and provides the management of multiple web applications through this single native container, which is actually something that we developed and filed for a patent going back to, I believe, 2008, 2009, and were recently granted the patent on it. So we've been somebody out here who's been really working on this, the container solution for quite some time now, and are really a pioneer in this space. And what it essentially does is it provides a lot of different real-time and offline capabilities and built-in connectors and adapters to allow quick and easy integration into the back-end systems. So the client is essentially the end user interface into the container and into all the goodness of the AMP Chroma platform. So here, how it works is that once you have this AMP Chroma client running on your device, it's provisioned and deployed. You're able to provision and deploy pre-authorized HTML5 apps within a single native app container. So you can see here you authenticate in that smaller middle window there. You authenticate as a user. It downloads, depending on your profile, it downloads the latest updates that is controlled by the IT organization. And then marketing can control the distribution of branded applications directly to consumers, and also bypassing the App Store approvals as well. So, Joseph, is there anything?
No, I mean, I think that I guess this kind of paints the larger picture, because last webinar we covered the type of containers that enable web applications to behave like a native application, and that is a type of container, assuming that it's a type of native application that resides on the device that enables you to do that. This webinar, we're talking about type of container that enables you to provide management capability, provide secure storage, provide secure communication. And Antenna thought is very simple. What if we combine both? What if we have a container that can provide you some of those hybrid application containment capability, as well as provide you a way for an application to be managed. In addition, we basically added some additional features, unique features, so that you can go ahead and manage more than one web application within the same container. I think that it kind of combines best of both worlds, and if this fits your specific business requirement, I think that we have a unique offering that would enable you to kind of kill two birds in one, in one stone.
Well, to that point, on the next slide here, the client doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot without the management center behind it and AMP Manager. which is that single console for the management of the apps, the users, the devices, the content, and providing role-based administration. And what that means essentially is that you can have multiple administrators. So if you have multiple business units or departments that need to use this, Joseph can have one profile that he's logging into and managing his users and devices, and I'm logging in as a separate department or user and managing my own users and devices. And it's providing essentially the ability to secure and control these devices and the applications and all the information ultimately. And when you bring these elements together, it creates this closed loop here, which is essentially this this virtuous cycle here of security and management that is beyond just the development container that Joseph mentioned a minute ago. So this is something that we think is extremely powerful and extremely desirable for certain customers of ours. We'll talk in a second here about one of our customers that's currently using this. But before we do that, what's important to note here from a trend perspective and what we're trying to address is what you said a minute ago, Joseph, which is, can you have your cake and eat it too? Do you need to buy two different solutions? Do you need to have a container for developers to wrap the applications and provide sort of rapid development and distribution of the applications separate from a container to manage the applications? And when you look at this ecosystem and what Chrome is trying to address is really that nexus of development and management, where the application development and application management are coming together and converging at this container. And it's all being accelerated. These flames are being fanned by BYOD, and MDM has certainly addressed this need to a certain extent, but only goes so far. So what we feel is that is required here in the enterprise is this type of combined container solution to act as sort of the fulcrum for all three of these constituents here. So ultimately, what we're providing here is a combined container that provides developers with a fast and flexible and cost-effective approach for building, deploying, and updating cross-platform applications, combined with the management capabilities to isolate the company data from other components of a mobile device for greater security control, and an increasingly BYOD world where people are increasingly bringing their own devices into the workplace. And that's the essence of trying to make this easier and trying not to have to buy multiple solutions. Okay, let's talk for a second here about an actual customer using the container. Steris is an antenna customer. They're in the healthcare space, provider of surgical equipment, and they have thousands of technicians and service professionals out in the field that need to be connected to critical information and actually update information as well in real time. They actually chose the hybrid approach, HTML5 inside a secure container. One of the reasons is that they had a good amount of web development expertise in-house and assets as well that they could reuse and leverage. And from an end-user perspective, they needed to view documents and capture the signatures to help really speed along the service order completion process. So what they did is they were migrating over to iPhone and Android from laptops, and they needed to integrate into some pretty sophisticated back-end systems, Kronos and Siebel, Kronos for timekeeping, and also Active Directory for single sign-on. And as you can see here, this is a high-level abstraction of moving from the laptops to the iPhones and Android. And to their credit, this is actually even going back a few years, they jumped on the iPhone bandwagon pretty early on as an enterprise, which at the time was pretty revolutionary, and recognized the value of a container for not just sort of speeding along the development process and doing that in a cost-effective manner, but also getting the additional security and management capability they needed for their particular use cases. So for their 1,500 users out in the field, you can see they have the ability to clock in, pull up their their accounts, their activities, their trunk inventory, look at the service history, do some scheduling through the calendaring system here, look up the parts and track the parts as well. Again, all this being done through a container solution. And for them, what's the future look like? Well, the container for them doesn't just address their needs today that they need. Again, things like rapid development, but also encryption and protection of the data, as well as store and forward connectivity in case some of their workers go out of coverage or go in the basement of a building, let's say, or into a hospital. They need to make sure that those messages are being held and managed appropriately and then being forwarded on when they get back in within coverage. Also, pushing updates was important to them as well. So that type of a solution, the container solution, was very critical for them. But more importantly, it also sets them up for the future in doing other types of applications as well on a variety of different form factors and truly leveraging the cloud, and also leveraging tablets for richer contextual experience for their end users, and also leveraging data and doing other applications as well within the secure container. So for them, it was really the right choice and one that they're very happy with and continue to build on moving forward. And very much example of how these two worlds can combine, again, through not having to buy a solution for app wrapping and for development. It's separate from the container for security management. And again, container is a broad term that can mean a lot of different things to different people, depending on your perspective and your vantage point. From the one perspective, they help developers get their apps built and deployed more quickly. And they also provide the IT the assurance that sensitive data will not commingle with personal data. There's a lot of different options in the marketplace today for containers, which makes it difficult to understand and appreciate their differences. So when evaluating the providers, you need to consider what their legacy agenda and their perspective is when making that selection. Also, be sure to bring all parties to the table when selecting a container to make sure that everyone's needs are being heard. So you've got folks from the development organization, but also architects, maybe folks from the business units as well, maybe folks from the IT organization or from the security organization. It's important to bring everybody forward when making this decision to ensure that you're addressing everybody's needs. Don't forget about the end user. A lot of times too much time when talking about containers is put onto the security and control, which can sometimes have an adverse effect on the end user satisfaction and productivity. Too much security can sometimes really impede adoption and satisfaction with the end user. So it's important to find that balance between control and enablement. And you want to find a solution that enables the business to move quickly, but not at the cost of data security as well. And hopefully today we've shown you that Antenna can provide the best of both worlds through our AMP Chroma and the AMP client solution. And as such, we've been doing this, as I said earlier, for a long time. We have the patent on this technology. In our history, we've been recognized many times by leading analyst firms like Gartner as a leader in this space. And brands like Coke, Walmart, Xerox, Royal Bank of Scotland, and hundreds other rely on us every day to leverage the mobile channel and mobilize their employees and their customers. So in general, hopefully this was helpful for you today. Joseph, thank you very much for your help. And speaking of Gartner, if you're interested in getting a copy of the latest report from Gartner, their Magic Quadrant for 2013, we hear that it's coming out any day, any moment. And you can go to this link here, tiny.cc/getmadp, and you can register for a free copy, and we'll get you your very own copy as soon as it's released from Gartner when it comes out, hopefully this week or next week. So with that, thank you all very much. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this presentation. Again, if you're interested in hearing part one, we encourage you to go to our website and listen to that and other webinars. And if you have a question or comment you want to share with us, by all means, feel free to tweet us at Antenna Software or #ContainerWebinar. Thank you all very much. Joseph, thank you.